Hey, this is Sam Stone with CBR here with the latest edition of Dynamic Duos with Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg. You might know them as the hosts of Cartoonist Kayfabe, and of course, Ed's got a new volume of Hip Hop Family Tree, the Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus coming out. Jim's got Street Angel, Princess of Poverty through Image Comics. And you guys have been self-publishing through Patreon and that sort of thing for years. Guys, thanks for taking the time to sit down with me today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Sam. Thanks for having us.
Yes, sir.
No problem at all. This, for people who aren't aware, this year marks the 5th anniversary of Cartoonist Kayfabe. like how, in fact, Ed and I were talking before we were rolling, like this month in terms of just recording time. Looking back on it, how has that whole journey been?
It's been pretty good, man. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ed. It's been interesting because as you realize when you go back 5 years, like that includes COVID lockdown. It includes us adopting a daily schedule. It includes us bringing on like interview guests. That was something we didn't have initially. So there's been a lot of evolution and a lot of real life around it. One of the things that was great from my limited point of view is doing it through COVID. It kept something steady and it kept like interaction at a time when I know people were struggling by not having those two things in their life. And we heard from a lot of our fans that, kind of found that to be a welcome thing, to be able to wake up each morning at 9 a.m. and see a new video or listen to us talking about comics, as a brief escape, if nothing else, for a very strange time in all of our lives. So, it's been, sometimes I feel like it's been a lot longer and sometimes I feel like we've just started.
The culture has reached a point where if you're out of sight, you're out of mind, and comics takes a while to make. You're lucky if you get a book done a year. On a good year, I might get, 120 pages done tops, and that might not yield an entire volume of stuff. So it is pretty much death to, or at least it's tempting fate to allow your brand, your comics to kind of sit back on the sidelines away from everybody's interest or point of view until you inevitably have a book come out and stuff. And then, you do your promo or whatever. So with that in mind, and, it was David Hyde who hooked up this conversation with you guys right now. Mm-hmm. And I've been working with David for 10 years, pretty much, with the Hip Hop Family Tree box set back in like 2014. And seeing how the game is played from his end and the opportunities that he brought up for me that helped me like kind of boost the signal, it became clear that I got to have my own version of that. Like I got to have something where I can boost my signal. I can have control over it and, keep people appraised of the work. And, the best way on the internet, I think, to do that is to be very, very giving to the audience. Everybody could smell a rat whenever you're just on the hustle and you're just, totally self-promoting. So to do these episodes on the channel where we, dissect things, we have a bigger point, but we're going to talk about our own stuff too and just let people know what the heck we're up to. So it's been super valuable.
I mean, when you look at something that's like, you've got 500 some episodes just public.
Like 1,500.
Over 1,000. Yeah,
sorry,
1,500.
1,500. Sorry, at a exponent by that. The what are some of the things that you've learned and noticed across talking about Frank Miller comics or talking about Mike Mignola comics or having Howard Chaykin on the show?
It's funny at this point I could look at my work that I've done over the years of Cartoonist Kayfabe's existence, and I could see direct correlations between episodes we might have done, that week and the pages that I drew at that time. So that's one of those things too, where I consider myself a student of the game, and always in learning mode. And so learn from the best. So by kicking it with Jimmy and looking at these comics that we dig under the microscope, as we call it, having an extra brain, an extra fresh set of eyeballs to point out things I might not have seen, and vice versa. Heck of an education, and there are a lot of makers in the audience, and I think they get the same vibes.
Yeah, and it's interesting with the three artists that you named, Sam, is I've gotten to a point looking at these comics where I almost think if you make comics as a two separate writer and then an artist, it's almost a different medium or art form than when you have one person doing both as a cartoonist. That's really become like reinforced over 5 years of looking at this stuff because you're able to seamlessly draw what you're thinking of as the writer, if you're the same person, as opposed to doing it in a collaboration. I think that's pretty interesting. And the other thing with the three names that you mentioned there, these guys are innovators. And I think that that's really, really important. And it's not something that, if you look at the comics industry, you have two directions. One is we're going to mine what already exists until it's completely, leveled, and then we'll rebuild it and mine it again. And there's a lot of success there. There's been, I don't know, 500 Batman movies. I'm not sure, but it seems like they all have his origin. But the piece that stands out to me always as we go through this stuff, and sometimes those comics are great, but it's usually the innovators, the Frank Millers, the Howard Chaykins, the Mike Mignola's. And I think that if you look at like their position in comics history, that stands up. I think it's beyond subjective. If you were to list a bunch of the top books or the top comics or characters or creators, I think the majority of them are going to be these writer/artist cartoonists. And so that hunger to innovate as opposed to like repeating, I think, is something that I probably thought it going into this, but I definitely have had it reinforced as we've talked to some of these guys. And also as we've just revisited some of the works over time, it really stands out. I think the magic of cartooning is usually it's coming out of that kind of singular vision.
And you were mentioning the guests earlier, and was there ever, like, how was that incorporating that into the show? Was there ever the anxiety that you'd be bringing Yoko Ono into the White Album sessions?
Like that's not the case, man. You know what it is? It's like rather than that, because a Yoko, that would be like a third wheel host type character, and these are just guests. So it's closer to when Letterman is candid about the guests that he brings on, and how some people like. He'll praise Tom Hanks, who brings the ruckus every time, and they always do something like innovative, cool, some kind of skit. And then there's the danger of like a drip coming through or something like that, which is really hasn't been the case. But the impetus for that, I mean, it was something that we had in mind, but we were like very lazy about it, and we didn't pursue it that much. It was just like this is a possibility, but it was Todd McFarlane who reached out to us, and we didn't even have that big of an audience at that moment. We might have had a couple of thousand, maybe not even 10,000 subscribers, and he reached out himself and was like, "Hey, I'll be on your channel." So then it becomes the task of like figuring out how to even do that kind of thing. Jimmy and I were not in the AV club when we were in school. You know what I'm saying, man? So like all of this is learning on the fly, and I think that part is that rawness is evident. But I did a series of episodes with my friends looking through Miracle Man comics, and that was really me just kind of shoring up and going through a bunch of tests to make sure that I don't lose Todd McFarlane interview. Like something tells me you might not get Uncle Todd a second time if you screw it up that first time, man. So it's been pretty cool. It's a great addition, and in the spirit of education. Like the last people I'm looking to learn from are people who teach comics. I'd rather learn from people who have skin in the game, who actually, apply things rather than are like book learning folk. So that's part of my selfish motivation with talking to our guests.
And I did want to talk about some of the books. I mean, Ed, you're still doing like Switchblade Shorties. You can get them first through Patreon, if I can enunciate today. And you've also done Red Room since the show launched. I mean, Jim, you've been working on Street Angel for as long as I've known you. You've got Octobriana coming out just in time for for all this. Like, how is it like kind of coming back to your own creative comics, having like dissected them over for 1,500 episodes of Cartoonist Kayfabe?
The majority of the time is spent, at the drawing board. We tend to do these episodes in batches, so it's usually one day of work a week. It's a long day, but it's designed to maximize the rest of their time, so the majority of the time is definitely spent at the drawing table as opposed to at the microphone.
Mhm.
And that hasn't changed. Like, that was kind of the plan from the beginning. The channel was always going to be a promotional outlet for the comics that we make. I would say that building the audience has changed maybe the way we can sell comics. Probably the options that we have, along with just technology of comics, has changed. When you think of everything we can do publishing wise, like, I started making comics 25 years ago, and if you were doing indie comics, that meant you were working in black and white. The limits were vast compared to now, and those limits now, they don't exist anywhere. In terms of sales, distribution, promotion, and production, it's all completely opened up. So looking through these comics, talking to other creators, like, it's just adding tools to the tool set, really. Seeing what other people are doing, like Ed mentioned about, there is this vein of comics education out there now. And I often wonder, combine that with, like, comics being accepted as legitimate, you've taken away some of the trash outsider culture elements that I liked. All of my teachers and parents and family hated comics when I was growing up, and that was part of the allure. It's kind of punk rock or something like that. So it's neat to talk to these guys or to look at old comics and see, like, before it was standardized in any way, everybody's solving their problems in some creative, unique way. And there's a lot to be learned from that. You take pieces from everything. You get to a point where, like, now I have a million influences, as opposed to when you start out and, you have 3 guys that you really like. So that's kind of been a side effect in some ways from the channel, is just that exposure part. I'm sure I'm reading more comics in the last 5 years, and some stuff that I wouldn't have been revisiting, but they all have some lesson. And sometimes that lesson is, don't do this, but a lot of times it's those old comics, like I say, they're solving problems in creative ways. So you might see the same problem over and over, but it's completely different depending on the cartoonist and how they approach it.
Speaking to Jimmy's point about losing some of the grittiness, the street cred, and all that. That was the exact inspiration for the Red Room comic that I've been producing the past couple of years. We developed a healthy audience, of course, on the channel, and I wanted to put it to the test with an idea that would be totally polarizing. There will be people who are absolutely not on board with the kind of horror elements, the gory aspects and stuff. And I do feel like so much of the art of comics nowadays, certainly with the younger generations, there's a lot of checking of boxes to make sure that it's palatable across the board, which is, in my mind, the antithesis of art. So it's like, let's nut up, let's have a little less fear about people roasting you or something like that, and let's do a comic. And knowing that it'll be polarizing, let me put this audience to the test and see if I could hustle a comic under those strictures. And a couple 100,000 later, it's proven to be a pretty valuable platform. And with the stuff I'm doing now, which is going to be a daily strip, the plan for 2024 for myself is daily YouTube video, daily comic strip, and to really put out a bunch of stuff that is pretty rigorously labored over. I'm talking to you guys right now, working on strip 100. There's no time for nonsense. So the platform has proven to be extremely valuable, and my interest is in growing those numbers exponentially.
Sure. I mean, you both come from the self-publishing, come from a self-publishing background, like Jim was saying. And Jim, I remember once you visited, like, you were here at George Mason, and you had kind of explored the printing presses and stuff that we got here. But like, how, like, and you've both done, I mean, Ed, you've done stuff with Marvel. Like, how was it, how important is it keeping that DIY versus DIY aspect in your work? How closely embedded is that to your kind of creative process?
When it comes to the work, it's everything. Like, I'm not very interested in collaboration. I'm gonna make the comics I want to make, and I didn't spend a lifetime learning to make comics to listen to anybody. So every subject matter is on the table. While we still have a comic industry of sorts, there are publishers out there, and there are people who have warehouse space to hold inventory and ship it to stores. I'm going to take advantage of that and I'm going to keep building the biggest audience I possibly can using that vector, because when it all goes away, when Steve Jeppy cashes in his chips and is like, you know what, I'm done. I don't need this headache anymore. When DC, Time Warner does the checks the books and is like, this is hemorrhaging money for DC Comics. Then I'm going to start really like just doing the cottage industry thing. And part of Cartoonist Kayfabe is creating a buffer between myself and the industry, quote unquote, of comics, where these venues go away. Like we have this platform where we could still bang the drum and do our own thing, man. So creatively, and where I'm at, 100% creative, and I will solicit and break off profit to a publisher that I consider to be worthy and to who I consider to be sound, so that they could handle some of that other stuff. Because when I got started, I was a self-publisher for self-preservation. Like, it was just, I had no other option, and like, I did big numbers with my stuff, man. I sold like around 30,000 copies of my self-published WYSIWYG from my mama's basement, and that was a heck of a grind, man. Because I'm shipping comics all day, and I'm making comics all night, and I'm not eager to get back to that kind of shit. Like, I would like to not stuff envelopes and just be 100% creative. But if it comes down to it, we got the Kayfabe channel, and could always let people know what we have going on, and then handle business accordingly.
Yeah, and I'm kind of on the, I think, total opposite spectrum. If you lined up the way we're selling comics now, I feel like we might cover every sales outlet that's currently being used to sell comics, which is kind of cool. I think it works a lot on the channel that way, of us being different and coming at this stuff from different angles. But I love all this stuff. Like I used to say, the easiest way to hire me for a job was to offer me something I haven't done before. And that hasn't really changed much. So, I just continue kind of like looking at what these outlets are. You had mentioned Octobriana earlier. That was a Kickstarter that I did a couple years ago. And I had wanted to do a Kickstarter for 10 years just because I went, oh, that's kind of a new tool to try out. And I just didn't have anything that fit, So by the time I did it, it had been around for a decade. But we have so many of those tools. Like you mentioned, Switchblade Shorties. Man, Ed, that's a tough one to say 3 times fast. Is being serialized on Ed's Patreon. Red Room was serialized on his Patreon. So, you have all of these outlets, platforms, distro methods, and we both love history of comics. A lot of the channel covers history of comics. One of the big history things that was revelatory to me in the last 20 years, like once I started making comics, was how much distribution affected the content. Like whenever the direct market becomes viable in the early 80s, that's when you get Love and Rockets. That new distribution model completely allowed new comics to be created that, are some of the best comics that were ever made. They just couldn't have existed when newsstand was your distribution model. And now we have all of these different distribution models, patronage models, all of these different things to try. And it's kind of amazing. Like, you can apply the creativity that you apply to a story or to a drawing or to a design to every element of the business now. And it kind of surprises me that we haven't seen anything too outrageous coming out of people, just because these tools are robust. It's almost a level playing field. I was thinking of James Jean is an artist that I like and follow, and he would make these beautiful art books. And at some point, he just started publishing themselves and distributing them through the regular book distribution channels. And at that point, there's no limit. There's nothing that you're missing out on if you can have your book distributed by all the major book distributors, and if you can control all the production stuff. Like, why not? The other one that I look at was Taylor Swift. Like, she's sort of a modern G.I. Joe for me, in that she has concerts, she has music. Now she has movies that she's producing and distributing herself. Like, it's kind of cool on a self-published comic book level to do self-publishing, right? It's a way for me to sell 1,000 comic books and actually make profit on them. But that's also scalable. You could be the biggest entertainment act in the world, like Taylor Swift. What do you think her cut of that movie is compared to if she had gone through a studio, if she had gone through that traditional system? So it works with however many zeros you want to line up, past that decimal point. Like, it works great for a 1 billion seller, and it works pretty well for 1,000 sellers. So it's kind of interesting how much power we have now. I follow the NBA and I think about like the player empowerment stuff. We are living in a time where like cartoonists can have that. We can control every element of our work in terms of how it's distributed and exploited. So I want to do that. I want to explore that stuff. I kind of find it as interesting. I find it more interesting than some of the comics we look at, to be honest.
The Jim, you know, like I was saying earlier, you've been working with Street Angel for a while. Like, how is it like? Do you just kind of sit like, oh, this would be a really fun situation? like how is it kind of like maintaining that love for the character and kind of finding new directions for like, all these years later?
It comes and goes. I do other projects, between books. So it's almost like I'll do a clip of Street Angel stories and then, go do Hulk Grand Design or Octobriana or something. And in that time away, the ideas continue. And I have a writing partner, Brian Maruka, and we have a shared folder of, I don't know, 200 story ideas in various stages of development. So you just keep a record of this stuff. I have sketchbooks and notebooks that I work in. And if something comes up or I see something that kind of, seems like a germ of an idea or even a complete idea, I'll just record it. And then whenever I have time, you revisit this stuff. Whenever I did the Image Comics Free Comic Book Day Street Angel comic, that was a story that I had developed. And then it was like opportunity, and a lot of times that's what happens is you have X amount of time, you may know what the format is. And then it's like, what idea do I have that I'm excited to do for right now? And, you kind of go back into those sketchbooks or whatever. So yeah, it's I don't know, man. It's not a problem figuring out ideas. It's much more of a problem of figuring out one idea out of, maybe 100.
Sure. Ed, the Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus is like you get the chance to see everything collected together. And I remember going through the Smithsonian a couple of years ago and seeing Hip Hop Family Tree in it. Like, as a kid from Pennsylvania, like how is it seeing all of this and like seeing it all together in this big, beautiful package?
Yeah, all the satellite stuff that comes with Hip Hop Family Tree was such a pleasure and such a treat, man. Something I definitely don't take for granted, and that's something that like family can understand whenever they see the big cover for Hip Hop Family Tree right next to Eddie Van Halen's guitar at the Smithsonian for some music exhibit. Like that's something that they get, like the fam might not understand me just sitting around drawing comics all day. They don't know what that is, but you present a book to somebody and they know the deal. I think it was literally a Facebook memory that came up at the beginning of the year that made me realize that it is the 10-year anniversary of the first published volume of Hip Hop Family Tree. And, that was a very transformative, life-changing experience for me, man. Like I was, just in the game for probably close to 10 years at that point, really. But pretty obscure, and really fighting tooth and nail for work and to make ends meet and things like that. So it's sort of the 10-year anniversary of being out of, abject poverty and things like that. Like I have a lot of shit wrapped up in that. And when I take a look at all that work at once inside the Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus, which is the best book I ever made, by the way, man, I hope everybody scoops it up. I look at that and it's this very personal scrapbook of sorts where I just know where I was every day on every single one of those pages. 10% of the last chapter is drawn on airplanes and in Denmark specifically. Traveled the world thanks to that comic. Got to meet so many of my favorite rappers. Probably my greatest collaboration is designing those Public Enemy action figures with my favorite rap group when I was a little scrub, kicking it with Jimmy and them for the first time. Like since I was 15 years old to like maybe 25, every single T-shirt I had was a Public Enemy T-shirt. It was just kind of a thing I would do because that group was so important to me. So then when my favorite rap group reaches out to design their action figures, like that's such an honor. So it's fun. I think about comic generations, and there have been people who have, like, I'm old enough and Hip Hop Family Tree is old enough that I get comments on social media from people who are very well meaning, and they tell me how they've been reading Hip Hop Family Tree since they were a kid. And that trips my head out, right? So I imagine that there's the potential for a whole bunch of new readership now that the book is 10 years old. Maybe some stores, it's constantly in print. It's 11, 12 printings at this point with the first volume, but put a new coat of paint on it, put a whole bunch of new extras in the mix, and then present it to a whole new generation of comic reader.
When you're doing something like Hulk Grand Design or X-Men Grand Design, which are also, deep dives of history and everything, but, how do you keep that kind of like DIY aspect and that kind of spirit to it when you're working with like licensed like corporate characters?
It was so simple.
Yourself.
Yeah, it was so simple with Marvel, because like when I set up X-Men Grand Design, like I had all this stuff that I wanted, and it's like don't print my stuff up on that crappy ass glossy paper that you print all your other books up on. Like, have the trade be Hip Hop Family Tree size. The biggest mistake I made was allowing everybody to call it Treasury Edition when it's really Hip Hop Family Tree size comics. Man, it's different. And if they would have said no to any of that, because Marvel really doesn't do contracts all like that. Like, I'm not exclusive. I wasn't exclusive with them or anything like that. And they gave me a rate before, and that just kind of carried over. I could have stopped at any time if I felt like stuff was fishy, but I probably would have still done the comic and just put it out on social media, and might have even gotten a bigger audience than I did by putting it out with them. So I was in a position of power, because I do make the comic entirely myself. So if at any point stuff would have got tricky and I would have felt like they were sabotaging it, I would have just bounced. And thankfully we did mutually good business. I have no complaints. And there's a new trade coming out with the entire trilogy, so they're keeping it in print, and can't ask for much more than that from the corporate overlords.
Jim, how about you with Hulk?
Same deal. If you do it all yourself, literally DIY stands for do it yourself. So, that's pretty much what it was. Marvel was very hands off on with me. I don't know, Ed, if that was how they were with you, but it was pretty much like we set up deadlines, and as long as I was turning stuff in, it was mostly like good. Not nothing that was. They weren't nitpicking. They weren't editing anything really, and so it kind of was like any other comic that I would make, except that who I'm sending it to, whenever I had a bunch of pages done or whatever. So it was a fun experience. As Ed said, it was a good experience overall. I have no complaints about it. But in terms of keeping that DIY quality, I mean, if you're writing, drawing, coloring, designing, lettering, doing everything yourself, it would be hard not to keep the DIY part, Yeah.
Like establishing the grand design stuff, with Axel Alonso, and pretty much everybody who works there at this point is like, that would have never happened with anybody but Axel. He was willing to, take interesting chances and stuff like that. And X-Men Grand Design bared plenty of fruit to bring a couple other guys into the mix. But when we set it up, there was no deadline. There was nothing. Like, the dude, they signed me up, and there was no plan of anything. It was just like, okay, see how long it takes to get some stuff done. And it was my suggestion rather than theirs to like break it down into these 2-issue segments. Cause like I was signed up for 6, and it took maybe a year and a half or two years to get that first section done. And, it took like a year and a half. And then I was like, San Diego is coming up. Why don't we just do it in these 2-issue blasts? Because I think it'll take probably a year to do 2 issues, 80 pages. And they were totally cool with it. And then that establishes the format that Jim and Tom put together. 2 issues, 40 pages apiece, big old trade afterward.
If I had one complaint on it, I wish we would have had more of the promotion on in our hands. It's something that we went through. Like I mentioned about, you'd have a bigger audience if you ran it online, and it's hard for me to understand why Marvel opposes that.
You know what though, man? Like I don't know what the deal is with, and maybe it's the Axel thing, because during my work on that project, it went from Axel to CB. Like I woke up to a text from Axel saying, job well done. I'm on to bigger and better. But part of my rules for playing around with those dudes at Marvel was you have to let me have my own publicist, man. And once again, we're circling back to David Hyde, the guy who set up this conversation right here. It's like, nah, man, I have to have David Hyde on the hook because I'm a student of the history of comics. And I think about stuff like Jimmy, we covered it, and it was an issue of Wizard where Neil Gaiman was talking about doing that Alice Cooper comic for Marvel, and then finding out years later when he was writing, doing promotion for American Gods, that Rolling Stone magazine was like looking to do interviews to promote that Alice Cooper comic, and Marvel like intentionally prevented that from happening. Like they said that they will not actively, they're not in a business of promoting individual talent. And X-Men Grand Design, that's all me. So it's like I have to be able to promote this thing and put it out there because I'm not going to be orphaned by the publisher. Because in effect, like what could happen is if you break it down, I had at that point I went from volume 4 of Hip Hop Family Tree directly to X-Men. It could have been a situation where because Hip Hop Family Tree is super lucrative for me, I could have done a 5th volume, a 6th volume. It could have been a situation where they just take you out of that game and then give you peanuts to make this X-Men comic, and then you're not doing your real shit. So I had to make it work for me. And then when CB takes over, it was still that hands-off vibe, but the fact that they don't let you get a publicist on the hook or something like that is, it's a definition of whack.
I have one more thing, Sam, on that topic. We looked at the Creators' Bill of Rights, which was an 80s thing that Scott McCloud and Dave Sims, Steve Bissett, Eastman and Laird, some of these self-publishers and indie artists kind of got together and laid these ideas out. And a lot of them, I'd say it's kind of a thought piece. If you're coming into comics, it's a good idea to give it a read because it'll make you think of some stuff maybe you wouldn't think of on your own, especially at the beginning. And one of their things was the right to promote the work that you make. And it's funny that that's a piece in contracts, what you can show, what you can say, who you can talk to. Like some of that stuff is really draconian in the contract stage. And we often, talk about this stuff as much as we can. In some cases there are NDAs and you really can't discuss some of the finer terms. But I do think that it's something that, we've said several times on the channel, and I would continue to tell people is like, that's a thing to keep in mind when you're going through your contracts and you're asking for stuff before you sign those contracts, because it does allow you to show off the work on your own channels. It allows you to promote yourself in conjunction with the work. And if the person you're partnering with or the company you're partnering with isn't interested in promoting the work to its maximum, that might tell you a lot too about who you're getting in bed with in business.
Yeah, man. Like right now I'm working on this daily strip, this forthcoming daily strip that I plan to put out January 1st of 2024. Switchblade Shorties is the title, right? And I'm already in talks with a major publisher, New York style publisher, not a comic publisher. And one of the things that was imperative, because I know people that serialize some stuff online and then they get hooked up with a publisher who discovered their material from the serialization online. They make the deal with the devil, and then the publisher tells them you can no longer serialize the thing and wait for the book to come out. That very old, 20th century logic that the old timers bristled at when the internet really came into prominence. And so like the conversations that I'm having right now, and they're totally like, they're so on board. I told them I have to still serialize this thing online. Every single page of this comic is going to be available for free online. And they were like, oh, dude, you're doing us the favor. You're doing us, promotional services. We can't put a price tag on that. And I was like, well, you know what? I can put a price tag on that. But they're totally on board. And it's just crucial. And once again, like that Creator Bill of Rights, you set this stuff up, you establish your boundaries and what needs to happen early, and then maybe you have a good business relationship. For the bulk of my professional career, it's been that way. There've not really been any surprises, from Hip Hop Family Tree forward, and I think that comes from communication, and I think that comes from just knowing what's out there. And that creator bill of rights certainly comes into play. And we have so much. It's 2023. We have a lot of years of the internet and World Wide Web being out there. There's no stopping it. So it's like we have to get those guys to think of just different promotional models and not to be so withholding, because that just it does. I could, for every one thing that you point out that might have just come out of nowhere and gained massive success, I could probably point to 50 things that went viral online and then achieved a final form in whatever medium of choice. I was just watching something with comedians having a conversation, and one guy was very excited about like a Netflix special, that this comedian had a Netflix special, and the comedians were like, "No, we do that for the boomers. We do that for the old heads who still think TV matters." But none of that kind of stuff happened like out of thin air. It happened because I went viral on YouTube. It happened because I have a TikTok, and I do. I specialize in this one goofy kind of TikTok trend. So there's the gatekeepers are gone, and we have a lot of control. And starting with Hip Hop Family Tree, every single page of that is online for free, and we're coasting way past 500,000 copies of that. Since the channel started, I was like doing the calculations. I had to pay a lawyer, all that kind of shit. I'm doing the numbers. It's like I got 1 million comics out there, and that is not to be taken lightly. And so much of that comes directly from being able to signal boost it myself. Certainly, when you work with these publishers, they have a publicity person who's responsible for promoting the entire catalog. Like my hip hop book has come out the week after Dan Clow's Monica. You think Fanta is giving me any juice, man? All of that stuff goes directly to Dan Clow's, man. So they got David Hyde to hook me up with some stuff like this, which I'm very, very thankful for. But the bulk of it is, my own doing with kayfabe and, streaming online and showing off images and all that kind of stuff. So we have a lot of control, and I really do believe that the game is the individuals to lose, and it's up to, like, are you willing to go above and beyond? Are you sitting there thinking that you make the comic and then that's it? Leave it to the fates to sell your stuff. I'd like to promote that idea to everybody else, man, so that it makes my job easier. That's for sure.
We should be kayfabing some of these messages, Ed.
Yeah, right.
I always kind of saw this episode as like a crossover,
Yeah,
like
totally.
kayfabe, like dynamic duo CBR, like crossover.
No, it's funny because like the email that you guys sent with like talking points and stuff, and it's like I got about 3,000 hours on the record with this guy right here, man. Like I feel like we could handle that, but Sam, that's not diminishing your contribution. I appreciate it a lot, man. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. There's some, without naming names, like there's some guests that just need the juice. But I
Totally.
mean, I know you guys have been in the game for a long time. I mean, I got into CBR because I had a podcast where I talked to you about X-Men Grand Design, where I talked to Jim about Street Angel and everything. And so it's almost like a full circle moment for me.
Yeah, good for you, man. Congrats.
I guess in the spirit of promotion, and I think let's kind of close out. What can readers look forward to next, but in the cartoonist kayfabe and the comic book projects you guys are putting out?
I have been self-publishing some zines and comics lately, and I'm actually putting those on sale for the first time online tonight at midnight. So that'll be up for as long as supplies last, or maybe for a week. basically I'm calling it a pre-holiday sale. So it's a 1986 zine, a BW zine, and True Crime Funnies, which are some nonfiction comics that I've made recently. And in November, Street Angel Princess of Poverty will be in stores from Image Comics. Pick that one up if you haven't already. It goes with it's kind of the matching set for Deadliest Girl Alive, and that collects all of the Street Angels comics I've made so far. Those 2 books, and after that, it'll be like wrapping up the year and then getting into next year. And my plan is to keep making self-publishing comics because I've kind of enjoyed that, as I talked about earlier. But you can follow us on Cartoonist Kayfabe every day of the week and keep up there, as well as our social media.
I'm going for 2 million comics now out in circulation. I'd like to try to hit that number sooner than later, man. So the things that are on the docket at the moment, of course, we talked about it, the Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus. One of my thoughts is, man, I'd like to see that go out of print in 2023. I think that would be a nice Christmas present everybody could do for me. And I think we're more than 75% of the way there. It's only been a week too, so super appreciative of that. There's going to be a new Red Room trade coming out in January for the Crypto Killers season of Red Room Comics, and very, very excited to launch this strip daily. Switchblade Shorties is the name. Right now, I'm working on strip 100. I'm trying to get a big buffer so that I can put these out daily, and then allow life to sort of run its course, but still be reliable with the strips. And I'm serializing it on the Patreon right now. I look forward to putting it out next year. And what I'm going to do, the way I'm going to distribute this, is to put it on the Kayfabe social media, my own Ed Piskor social media, so Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, maybe do like a Line Webtoon channel, page, whatever you want to call it. It seems to lean way more towards manga style, but we'll give it a shot. And then probably once a week, I'll do a reading kind of video where I show the images and then make a video and put it on Cartoonist Kayfabe like on Saturdays, kind of like a Saturday morning cartoon or something. And just see what we could do with this. I got this big platform with Kayfabe. My own personal Instagram has just kind of blown up since doing Kayfabe. So let's see. I am firmly of the belief that complain little and action items. If something is, if you want something, then you just got to make it. And I like daily serialized adventure comic strips. They haven't made them in decades, but I'm in a position where I can take the gamble. It's a big goal. It's a tough goal, but very, very much looking forward to putting it out there. And I hope that the audience supports it. And I hope that, it does well enough that it gets other cartoonists to deign to put together like a really kind of serious serialized comic with some rigor and some craft to it.
And is next year a leap year? Do you have to do 366 comics?
I'm up for it, man. Like everything's revolving around the strip at this point, man. So with that in mind, like I'm able to do a strip a day and breathe. So I've nudged myself. I've given myself enough of a boot camp. I was hoping that over the course of 100 pages, I would figure out a way to do that. And it seems to be the case. And there's no loss in quality. If anything, I think it looks better. So I'll take on all comers, man. Let's create a new kind of year that has 367 days. It's all good.
Okay,
yeah, right.
Well, gotta go over that international dateline a couple times, Ed.
Heading to Japan in November, man. So my year is going to be 369 days long.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. 14-hour time difference after, because they don't have savings. Anyway.
Hey, one more, Sam. I'm going to be at Big Apple Con December 16th. It's my first show in New York in a long time. So New Yorkers, put it on your calendar. You can catch up with me there.
And there you have it. December 16th, Big Apple Con. You can check out Jim Rugg, and at that point, he'll have Street Angel Prince of Poverty will have been on the shelves, so be sure to get it and get it signed. Cartoonist Kayfabe, you can check out new episodes every day, and keep an eye out for Ed's short switch. It is a hard term to say. Switchblade shorties available through Patreon and every day through 2024. It's been another installment of Dynamic Duos. I'm Sam Stone. Guys, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks so much,
Sam.
man.